My husband Daniel sat across from me at our kitchen table, the same table where we'd shared 1,000 meals, and said the words that would seal his fate. I want a divorce, but let's keep it civil. No drama, no lawyers fighting, just a clean break. He smiled when he said it. I actually smiled. Like he was doing me a favor. Like the 15 years I'd given him, the career I'd sacrificed, the life I'd built around his dreams meant so little that we could just shake hands and walk away. He wanted no drama. So I gave him exactly what he asked for. A divorce so clean, so precise, and so devastatingly thorough that by the time he realized what hit him, there was nothing left to fight over. If you've ever been blindsided by someone you trusted, if you've ever been treated like you were disposable after years of loyalty, this story is for you. I'm about to tell you how I turned my husband's arrogance into his complete downfall, and I did it all without raising my voice once. If you believe that karma sometimes needs a little help, hit that like button, turn on the notification bell and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any of my revenge stories. Grab a seat and buckle up because what Daniel wanted was a clean divorce. What he got was a masterclass in consequences. My name is Rebecca Chen, and for 15 years, I was the perfect corporate wife. I say that without pride or shame. It's just a fact. I was the woman who hosted dinner parties for Daniel's colleagues, who remembered everyone's birthdays, who made sure his shirts were pressed and his presentations were proofread. I was the woman who gave up her own career in graphic design to support his rise through the ranks at Meridian Financial Group. When we met, I was 26 and working at a boutique design agency in Seattle. I was good at what I do. Really good. I just landed a major client, a tech startup that wanted a complete brand overhaul, and my portfolio was growing. Daniel was 28, ambitious, charming, and completely convinced he was going to change the world of corporate finance. He had this energy about him, this certainty that everything he touched would turn to gold. We got married 6 months after we met. Everyone said it was too fast, but we didn't care. We were in love, or at least I thought we were. Daniel said he needed a partner who understood that his career would demand everything from him. He said he needed someone strong enough to hold down the home front while he fought the battles in the boardroom. He made it sound noble. He made it sound like I would be his secret weapon, the power behind the throne. So I said yes to everything. Yes to moving to Denver for his first big promotion. Yes to putting my career on hold because his job required so much travel. Yes to the bigger house in the suburbs that I would manage alone while he worked 70-hour weeks. Yes to being the face of our family at every school event, every neighborhood gathering, and every holiday, while he sent apologetic texts about being stuck in meetings. The thing about sacrifice is that it happens slowly. You don't wake up one day and realize you've given everything away. It happens in tiny increments. A missed client meeting because Daniel needed me to entertain his boss. A declined job offer because we were moving again for his career. A hobby abandoned because there was no time between managing the house and supporting his ambitions. You tell yourself it's temporary. You tell yourself it's worth it. You tell yourself that when he makes partner, when the promotions slow down, when things stabilize, then you'll get your turn. But 15 years passed, and my turn never came. Daniel became a partner at Meridian 3 years ago. It was everything he'd worked for. The salary jumped to $400,000 a year, plus bonuses that could double that. We moved into a beautiful home in Cherry Creek, the kind of house I used to dream about. 5 bedrooms, a gourmet kitchen, a backyard that looked like it belonged in a magazine. I decorated every room myself, spent months choosing paint colors and furniture, making it perfect. I thought that would be when things got easier, when we'd finally have time for each other. Maybe start the family we'd always talked about. I was 41. If we were going to have children, it had to be soon. But Daniel got busier. More travel. More late nights and more dinners with clients that I wasn't invited to. And when he was home, he was distant and distracted. Always on his phone, always checking emails, always mentally somewhere else. I tried to talk to him about it. I really did. I'd bring it up gently over breakfast. Maybe we could plan a vacation? Just the two of us. He'd nod, say absolutely, and then nothing would happen. I'd suggest dinner out, just to reconnect. He'd agree, then cancel an hour before because something came up at work. The loneliness of that house was suffocating. I'd walk through rooms I'd carefully designed and feel like a ghost haunting my own life. I tried to restart my design career. I reached out to old contacts, updated my portfolio, and took some online courses. But 15 years away is a lifetime in the creative industry. Technology has changed. Trends had shifted. And I was a 41-year-old woman trying to compete with hungry 25-year-olds who were willing to work for half my rate. I took freelance projects where I could find them. Small stuff. Logo designs for local businesses. Social media graphics for friends starting Etsy shops. It paid enough for my personal expenses, my coffee habit, and my yoga classes. But it wasn't a career. It was a hobby that made money. Meanwhile, Daniel's star kept rising. He was being mentioned in industry publications. His name appeared on 40 under 40 lists. He was invited to speak at conferences. And I was the wife. The plus one. The woman smiled politely before turning back to talk to him. I want you to understand something. I wasn't unhappy because I wasn't rich or important. I was unhappy because I'd become invisible. Even to my own husband. The Thursday it all fell apart started like any other Thursday. Daniel came home at 7:30, which was early for him. I'd made his favorite dinner, pan-seared salmon with roasted vegetables and wild rice. I'd even opened a bottle of the expensive Pinot Noir he liked. I thought maybe we could actually have a conversation. He barely looked at the food. He sat down, poured himself a glass of wine, and cleared his throat in that way he did when he was about to deliver bad news to a client. Rebecca, we need to talk. My stomach dropped. In 15 years of marriage, nothing good had ever followed those words. Okay, I said, setting down my fork. My hands were already shaking. I could feel it coming. I didn't know what it was, but I could feel it. I've been doing a lot of thinking, he said. His voice was calm and measured, like he was presenting a business proposal. About us. About where we are. And I think we need to be honest with each other. Honest about what? He took a sip of wine. Actually took a sip of wine before answering, like he needed the fortification. I don't think we're happy anymore. Either of us. The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the table. What are you talking about? Come on, Rebecca. We barely talk. We barely see each other. When was the last time we had a real conversation? When was the last time we? He gestured vaguely. I knew what he meant. That's because you're always working, I said. My voice sounded strange. High and thin. You're never here. I know. And that's part of the problem. My career is demanding. It's always going to be demanding. And I don't think that's fair to you. Fair to me. I repeated. Daniel, I've spent 15 years supporting your career. I've moved across the country. I've given up jobs. I've built my entire life around your schedule. And now you're saying it's not fair to me. I'm saying we want different things. He was so calm. So reasonable. It was infuriating. You want a traditional marriage. Someone who's home for dinner every night. Someone who's present. And I can't be that person. My work is my priority. It always has been. It didn't used to be, I whispered. When we got married, I was your priority. We were kids, he said. We didn't know what we wanted. Now we do. And I think the kindest thing we can do is admit this isn't working. Kindest. He used the word kindest. Are you seeing someone else? The question came out before I could stop it. He hesitated. Just for a second. But I saw it. No, he said. This isn't about someone else. This is about us. I didn't believe him. I could see it in his eyes, the way he wouldn't quite meet my gaze. But at that moment, I was too stunned to push. So what are you saying? I asked. You want a divorce? I think it's best, he said. For both of us. And I want to do this the right way. No fighting. No dragging each other through court. We're both adults. We can be civil about this. Civil, like our marriage was a business contract that had reached its expiration date. I've already talked to a mediator, he continued. Someone who specializes in amicable divorces. We can sit down, divide everything fairly, and move on with our lives. No drama. No mess. Just a clean break. That's when I realized. He'd already planned this. He'd already made calls, already set wheels in motion. This wasn't a conversation. It was a notification. He was informing me of a decision he'd already made. How long? I asked. My voice was barely audible. How long have you been planning this? Does it matter? Yes. It matters. How long have you been sitting across from me at this table, letting me cook your meals and do your laundry and manage your life, knowing you were going to leave? He sighed. A few months. I wanted to be sure. A few months. While I'd been trying to save our marriage, planning date nights he cancelled, suggesting couples therapy he dismissed, he'd been planning his exit strategy. Who is she? I asked again. Rebecca, I told you. Who is she? His jaw tightened. There's no one. I stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the hardwood floor I'd chosen, in the house I'd made a home. Get out. What? Get out of this house. Tonight. Right now. Rebecca, let's not do this. Let's not make this ugly. Oh, I'm not making this ugly, Daniel. I'm making it civil. No drama, remember? Just a clean break. So get your things and get out. He stood slowly. Fine. If that's what you want. I'll stay at a hotel tonight. We can talk when you've calmed down. Calm down. Like I was being hysterical. Like my reaction to my husband casually destroying our marriage over dinner was unreasonable. He went upstairs. I heard him moving around in our bedroom, the sound of drawers opening and closing, the zip of a suitcase. 20 minutes later, he came back down with a small bag. I'll call you tomorrow, he said. We'll figure out the details. I didn't respond. I just stood there in my beautiful kitchen, surrounded by the life I'd built, and watched him walk out the door. The silence after he left was absolute. I stood at that table for a long time, staring at the uneaten dinner, the half-empty wine glass, the chair he'd sat in. My hands were shaking. My whole body was shaking. And then, slowly, something else started to rise up through the shock. Something cold and clear and sharp as broken glass. Daniel wanted a civil divorce. No drama. No mess. Just a clean break. Fine. I could give him that. But civil didn't mean kind. And clean didn't mean fair. Daniel had taught me that over 15 years of marriage. He'd taught me that business was war conducted politely. That winning meant making your opponent think they were getting a good deal right up until the moment they realized they'd lost everything. He wanted to treat our divorce like a business transaction. Perfect, I said. Because I'd spent 15 years watching him conduct business. I knew how he thought. I knew how he negotiated. I knew every trick, every tactic, every manipulation he used to get what he wanted. And I was about to use all of them against him. That first night alone in the house was the longest night of my life. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Daniel's face across the table, heard his calm, measured voice explaining why our marriage was over like he was presenting quarterly earnings. I kept replaying the conversation, looking for signs I'd missed. How had I not seen this coming? But the more I thought about it, the more I realized the signs had been there all along. The way he'd stopped asking about my day. The way he'd started going to the gym at odd hours. The way his phone was always face down on the table. There was someone else. I knew it in my bones. Daniel had never been good at being alone. When we met, he'd just ended a 3-year relationship. He'd moved from that straight into dating me. He needed someone there. Someone watching. Someone reflecting back his success and importance. At 3 a.m, I got out of bed and went to his home office. Daniel kept everything organized. Color-coded files. Alphabetized folders. A place for everything and everything in its place. It was one of the things I'd admired about him when we first met. Now it was going to be his downfall. I started with the bank statements. We had joint accounts for household expenses, but Daniel had his own accounts for what he called business discretionary spending. I'd never looked at them closely. Why would I? I trusted him. What a fool I'd been. The statements showed a pattern. Charges at expensive restaurants I'd never been to. Hotel rooms in cities where he'd supposedly been staying with colleagues. Jewelry purchases from Tiffany's that I'd never received. And payments, regular monthly payments of $3,000, to something called Premier Property Management LLC. My hands were shaking as I wrote down the information. $3,000 a month. For how long? I scrolled back through the statements. 8 months. He'd been paying someone or something $3,000 a month for 8 months. I pulled up his credit card statements next. More hotels. More restaurants. And then I found it. A charge from a place called Bella Vita Condominiums. A quick Google search showed me it was a luxury high-rise in Lodhu, the trendy downtown neighborhood where young professionals lived in expensive apartments with floor-to-ceiling windows and rooftop pools. Premier Property Management LLC. $3,000 a month. Bella Vita Condominiums. Daniel was paying for someone's apartment. I sat back in his leather office chair and felt a strange, cold calm settle over me. This wasn't just a divorce. This was a betrayal that had been carefully planned and executed. While I'd been in our home, cooking his dinners and managing his life, he'd been setting up another woman in a downtown condo, paying her rent, taking her to fancy dinners and buying her jewelry. And now he wanted a clean break. No drama. No mess. The rage that filled me was unlike anything I'd ever felt. It wasn't hot and explosive. It was ice cold and calculating. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw things. I wanted to call him and destroy him with words. But I didn't. Because emotional reactions are easy to dismiss. Angry wives are expected to be irrational. If I confronted him with accusations and tears, he'd deny everything. He'd paint me as the crazy, jealous spouse who couldn't accept reality. He'd use my emotions against me in the divorce proceedings. No. I needed to be smart about this. Strategic. I needed to treat this exactly like Daniel would treat a hostile business acquisition. Gather intelligence. Identify weaknesses. Plan the attack. Execute without mercy. I spent the rest of that night documenting everything. I took photos of every bank statement, every credit card charge, every suspicious transaction. I organized them by date in a folder on my laptop, backed up to 3 different cloud services. I noted patterns. The jewelry purchase had been on Valentine's Day, a day Daniel had told me he was at a conference in Chicago. The hotel charges often fell on weekends when he'd claimed to be working on urgent projects. By dawn, I had a clear picture. My husband of 15 years had been cheating on me for at least 8 months, possibly longer. He'd been methodical about it, using business expenses to hide personal ones, mixing legitimate charges with fraudulent ones. He'd been so confident I would never check, never question, never look behind the curtain of his perfect life. When the sun came up, I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table where, just 12 hours earlier, my marriage had ended. I felt hollowed out. Empty, but also strangely focused. My phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. I hope you slept well. I think we should meet with the mediator this week. The sooner we get this process started, the sooner we can both move forward. I've already scheduled a preliminary session for Wednesday at 2 p.m. Let me know if that works for you. The audacity was breathtaking. He'd destroyed our marriage, moved his mistress into a downtown condo on our dime, and now he wanted to rush through a divorce before I had time to think. I stared at that message for a long time. Then I typed back, Wednesday works. See you then. Short, civil and agreeable. I wasn't going to give him any hint of what was coming. The next 3 days were a blur of activity. I called a lawyer, not a mediator, a real divorce attorney who specialized in high-asset cases. Her name was Patricia Valdez, and she'd been recommended by a friend who'd gone through a messy divorce 5 years earlier. Patricia's office was in a sleek high-rise downtown, all glass and steel and minimalist furniture. She was in her 50s, sharply dressed in a navy suit, with kind eyes and a handshake that meant business. Tell me everything, she said once we were seated in her conference room. I did. I showed her the bank statements, the credit card charges, and the pattern of deception. I told her about the 15 years I'd sacrificed my career for his. I told her about the house, the lifestyle, the image of success we'd carefully maintained. Patricia took notes, her expression neutral but her eyes sharp. When I finished, she sat back and looked at me. Colorado is an equitable distribution state, she said. That means marital assets are divided fairly, not necessarily equally. The fact that you sacrificed your career to support him is relevant. The fact that he's been hiding assets and supporting a mistress is very relevant. The fact that he wants to rush you through a mediation. She smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a shark that just spotted blood in the water. He thinks you don't know. He thinks you'll agree to a quick, simple split. 50-50, you keep the house, he keeps his retirement accounts, everyone walks away. Am I right? That's exactly what he wants, I said. He's in for a surprise, Patricia said. Here's what we're going to do. We spent the next 2 hours planning. Patricia explained that Colorado law allowed for fault-based considerations in property division. Daniel's infidelity and financial deception wouldn't end the marriage. Colorado was a no-fault divorce state, but it would absolutely affect how assets were divided. More importantly, Daniel's income as a partner at Meridian Financial included not just his salary but stock options, deferred compensation, and performance bonuses that were technically marital property. If I moved fast, if I was smart, I could walk away with far more than half. But here's the key, Patricia said, leaning forward. He cannot know you have an attorney yet. He needs to think you're going along with his plan. The mediation on Wednesday, you go. You listen. You nod. You don't agree to anything, but you don't fight either. You just gather information. Let him show his hand. Let him tell you what he thinks is fair. And then we'll destroy him with the truth. I left Patricia's office feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Power. Wednesday arrived. The mediator's office was in a professional building in the tech center, neutral territory. Daniel was already there when I arrived, sitting in the waiting room in his work suit, looking tired but relieved to see me. Rebecca, he said, standing. Thank you for coming. I know this is hard, but I really think we can get through this smoothly. I nodded. The mediator, a pleasant woman in her 60s named Susan, ushered us into a conference room. She had us sit on opposite sides of a table and began with a gentle speech about how mediation was designed to help couples separate with dignity and mutual respect. The goal here, Susan said, is to reach an agreement that both parties feel is fair. Daniel has indicated he wants to keep this as simple as possible. Rebecca, does that align with your wishes as well? I just want to understand what we're talking about, I said. My voice was calm. Reasonable. I want to know what Daniel thinks is fair. Daniel relaxed. I could see it in his shoulders, the way he leaned back in his chair. He thought I was cooperating. Great, he said. So, I've put together a preliminary proposal. He slid a folder across the table. Inside was a typed document outlining his vision of our divorce. I would keep the house, which still had a mortgage of $300,000 on it. He would keep his retirement accounts, his stock options, and his partnership stake in Meridian Financial. We would split our joint savings, about $80,000, 50-50. I would be responsible for my own vehicle and personal expenses going forward. No spousal maintenance, because Rebecca is capable of working and earning her own income. The entire proposal was designed to look generous while actually screwing me completely. Yes, I'd keep the house, and the massive mortgage payment that went with it. Meanwhile, he'd walk away with assets worth well over $1 million, plus his $400,000 annual income. I read it carefully. Twice. I could feel Daniel watching me, waiting for my reaction. Finally, I looked up. This seems like you've put a lot of thought into it, I said. He smiled. I tried to be fair. I know the house means a lot to you. You put so much work into it. And this way, you have stability while you rebuild your career. Rebuild my career. The career I'd abandoned for him. I need some time to think about it, I said. His smile faltered. What's there to think about? It's straightforward. Clean and simple. I understand, I said. But this is a big decision. I just need a few days to process everything. Susan intervened. That's completely reasonable, Rebecca. Why don't we schedule a follow-up session for next week? That gives you both time to review the proposal and come back with any questions or concerns. Daniel looked frustrated, but he couldn't push without looking unreasonable. Fine. Next week. We scheduled another session for the following Wednesday. As we left the building, Daniel caught my arm in the parking lot. Rebecca, I hope you're not going to make this difficult. I'm trying to do right by you. I looked at him. Really looked at him. This man I'd loved for 15 years. This man I'd built my life around. He actually believed what he was saying. He actually thought he was being generous. I know you are, I said. I'll see you next week. I drove home in silence. But as soon as I walked through my front door, I called Patricia. He showed his hand, I said. Now it's our turn. Patricia's strategy was beautiful in its simplicity. We weren't going to fight Daniel's proposal head-on. We were going to let him think he was winning right up until the moment we destroyed him. The element of surprise is everything, Patricia explained during our meeting the day after the mediation. If Daniel knows you have representation, he'll lawyer up immediately. His firm will bring in their big guns. Everything will become a battle. But if he thinks you're just a confused housewife trying to navigate this alone, he'll keep showing you everything. He'll keep making mistakes. She spread out a series of documents on her conference table. Bank statements, property records, employment contracts, tax returns. Over the past week, Patricia and her team had been digging into Daniel's finances like forensic accountants, and what they'd found was damning. Your husband has been very clever, Patricia said, but not clever enough. The condo he's renting for his girlfriend? He's been deducting it as a business expense on his taxes, claiming it's corporate housing for out-of-town clients. That's tax fraud. The jewelry purchases? Also written off as client gifts. More fraud. And here's the interesting part. She pulled out a document I didn't recognize. It was dense with legal language, but Patricia highlighted a specific section. This is Daniel's partnership agreement with Meridian Financial. Do you know what this clause means? I leaned closer. The highlighted section was titled Morality Clause. Meridian Financial is old school, Patricia explained. They manage money for conservative clients, wealthy families, religious organizations, pension funds. Their reputation is everything. So every partner signs an agreement stating they'll maintain high ethical standards both professionally and personally. If a partner engages in behavior that could damage the firm's reputation, infidelity, fraud, criminal activity, the firm has the right to dissolve that partner's stake and terminate their employment. My heart started beating faster. You're saying? I'm saying that if Meridian's board finds out Daniel has been committing tax fraud and carrying on an affair on company time using company resources, they won't just fire him. They'll take away his partnership stake, his stock options, his deferred compensation, everything. He'll be lucky to walk away with his base salary for the time he worked there. I sat back in my chair. The implications were staggering. But here's where it gets delicate, Patricia continued. If you expose this too early, Daniel might be able to negotiate a quiet exit. He could spin it, claim it was a misunderstanding, and offer to pay back what he owes. We need to time this perfectly. We need to gather all the evidence, build an airtight case, and then present it at exactly the right moment, when he's so committed to his narrative that he can't back out. The next mediation session, I said. Patricia smiled. Exactly. We go back to mediation. You tell Susan you've thought about Daniel's proposal, and you're willing to accept it with just a few minor modifications. You act agreeable, grateful, even. Get him to sign off on the basic framework. And then, once he thinks it's done, once he's relaxed and confident he's gotten away with it, that's when we bring in the real evidence. That's when we file the full divorce petition in court, bypassing mediation entirely. And we don't just ask for an equitable split of assets. We ask for everything. Over the next week, I became a different person. I still looked like Rebecca Chen, a 41-year-old housewife in yoga pants and minimal makeup. But inside, I was sharp and focused and absolutely ruthless. Patricia's team gathered more evidence. They subpoenaed Daniel's full financial records, which they could do quietly through pre-litigation discovery processes. They traced the Premier Property Management payments and confirmed they were going to a condo leased under someone else's name, a 28-year-old woman named Jessica Brennan, who happened to work in Meridian Financial's marketing department. Jessica, 28. Young enough to be dazzled by a successful partner. Young enough to believe his promises about leaving his wife. Young enough not to realize she was just another asset Daniel was acquiring. I looked at her LinkedIn profile late one night. She was pretty in that generic corporate way. Long dark hair, professional headshots, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Her profile said she joined Meridian 2 years ago, which meant Daniel had likely been grooming her for over a year before the affair started. I didn't hate her. That surprised me. I'd expected to feel rage toward the other woman, but instead, I just felt a distant pity. She was a pawn in Daniel's game, just like I'd been. The difference was that I'd figured out the game. She was still playing. Patricia also hired a forensic accountant who specialized in uncovering hidden assets. What he found was stunning. Daniel had been systematically moving money out of our joint accounts and into accounts I didn't know existed. Nothing dramatic, just small transfers, 2,000 or 3,000 at a time, always labeled as business expenses or investment opportunities. Over the course of 3 years, he'd moved over $200,000. This is financial abuse, Patricia said flatly. He's been preparing for this divorce for years. He's been hiding marital assets, defrauding the IRS, violating his employment contract, and lying to you about all of it. Any judge who sees this is going to be furious. How much can I get? I asked. Patricia looked at me seriously. If we play this right, you could get everything. The house with the mortgage paid off. His retirement accounts. A percentage of his partnership stake before Meridian dissolves it. Spousal maintenance for at least 10 years, probably longer. And the best part? He'll be so buried in legal fees and IRS penalties that he'll be working the rest of his life just to dig himself out. I should have felt guilty. I should have felt like I was going too far, being vindictive, letting my hurt drive me to destroy the man I'd once loved. But I didn't feel any of that. I felt clear, focused and righteous. Daniel had spent years lying to me, stealing from me, planning his exit while I cooked his dinners and supported his dreams. He'd treated our marriage like a business deal, and he'd tried to screw me in the final negotiation. Fine. I'd show him what a real hostile takeover looked like. The second mediation session arrived. I dressed carefully, nice jeans, a simple sweater, minimal jewelry. I wanted to look like a woman who was trying to keep it together but was clearly overwhelmed and vulnerable. Daniel was already in the conference room when I arrived, and this time, he wasn't alone. He'd brought someone with him, a man in an expensive suit who introduced himself as Thomas Carr, Daniel's personal attorney. My stomach dropped. He'd brought a lawyer. Did that mean he suspected something? But then Thomas spoke, and I realized the truth. Rebecca, Daniel wanted me here just to make sure all the paperwork is drawn up correctly. This isn't adversarial at all. I'm just here to help facilitate the process and make sure everything is legally binding. He was so confident, so smooth. He was there to rush me into signing, to make it official before I could change my mind or talk to anyone who might tell me I was getting screwed. Susan began the session by asking if I'd had time to review Daniel's proposal. I have, I said. My voice was soft, hesitant, and I think it's fair. I appreciate Daniel trying to make this easy. I could see Daniel relax, see the triumph in his eyes. I do have a few small questions, I continued. Just about the specifics of how we'd handle things like the joint credit cards, the timeshare we bought in Mexico, little things like that. Of course, Susan said. Let's go through everything line by line. We spent the next hour discussing details. I asked questions that made me sound concerned but not suspicious. I agreed to almost everything Daniel proposed. I even thanked him for being so generous with letting me keep the house. Thomas was making notes, already drafting the settlement agreement in real time on his laptop. This is great, Daniel said at one point. See? I told you we could do this without drama. I smiled. I just want it to be over. I want to move on with my life. Me too, he said. And I swear, he looked relieved. Maybe even a little guilty. Like he was realizing that I was being so reasonable that maybe he hadn't given me enough credit. Maybe he should throw me a bone. Offer me a little more just to assuage his conscience. Actually, he said, what if we increase your share of the savings? Instead of 50-50, you take 60%. That gives you a little more cushion while you're getting back on your feet. Susan looked pleased. Thomas nodded approvingly. They thought this was a breakthrough, a moment of genuine generosity. That's really kind, I said. Thank you, Daniel. By the end of the session, we had a preliminary settlement agreement. Daniel would take it to his lawyer to finalize the language, and then would sign it next week. As we were leaving, Daniel walked me to my car. I'm proud of us, he said. This could have been so ugly, but we're handling it like adults. Yeah, I said. We are. He squeezed my shoulder. A friendly gesture. Maybe even affectionate. You're going to be okay, Rebecca. You're stronger than you think. I watched him walk away, back to his expensive car, back to his expensive life, back to his 28-year-old girlfriend waiting in her expensive condo. I sat in my car for a long moment after he drove off. Then I called Patricia. He bought it, I said. He completely bought it. He thinks it's done. Perfect, Patricia said. Now we file. That night, Patricia and her team worked late. They prepared a comprehensive divorce petition to be filed with the Denver District Court, bypassing mediation entirely. The petition was 47 pages long and included a full accounting of all marital assets, including the accounts Daniel had hidden, documentation of Daniel's affair and the money he'd spent on Jessica Brennan, evidence of tax fraud related to false business deductions, copies of Daniel's partnership agreement with Meridian, specifically highlighting the morality clause, a request for an unequal division of assets based on Daniel's dissipation of marital funds and financial misconduct, a demand for spousal maintenance of $12,000 per month for 15 years, a request that Daniel be responsible for all marital debts, including the mortgage, a motion to freeze all of Daniel's accounts pending the outcome of the divorce. But the most devastating part wasn't in the divorce petition itself. It was the separate package Patricia had prepared for Meridian Financial's board of directors. We're not just divorcing him, Patricia explained as we reviewed the documents one final time. We're ending his career. And we're doing it simultaneously so he can't run damage control. The package for Meridian included copies of every fraudulent tax deduction, every payment to Jessica's condo, every hotel charge and restaurant bill that had been billed as business expenses. It included a timeline showing that the affair had been conducted primarily during business hours, using company resources. And it included a formal complaint stating that Daniel's conduct violated the morality clause of his partnership agreement. When do we file? I asked. Patricia checked her watch. It was Thursday night, just after 9 p.m. Tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., the divorce petition hits the court. At 9:30, a process server delivers a copy to Daniel at his office. At 10 a.m., this package is hand-delivered to every member of Meridian's board of directors, along with a cover letter from me explaining that the information is being provided in the interest of full disclosure and corporate governance. By noon, Daniel's entire world will have collapsed. I went home that night and couldn't sleep. Not from anxiety, but from anticipation. I kept thinking about Daniel's face, the moment he'd realize what was happening. The moment he'd understand that the quiet, agreeable wife he'd been so confident he could manipulate had been 3 steps ahead of him the entire time. At 8 a.m. Friday morning, my phone rang. It was Patricia. We're filing in 30 minutes. Are you ready? I'm ready. Rebecca, once this starts, there's no going back. Daniel is going to come at you with everything he has. His lawyers will be vicious. It's going to get ugly. Good, I said. I'm done with being clean and civil. At 9 a.m., I was sitting in my kitchen, the same kitchen where Daniel had asked for a divorce, where he told me he wanted no drama, when my phone started buzzing with notifications. The first was an email from Patricia. Petition filed. Process server en route. The second was a text from an unknown number. This is Thomas Carr. I need to speak with you immediately. Do not communicate with my client until we talk. I deleted it. The third was a call from Daniel. I let it go to voicemail. Then another call. By 9:45, he'd called 7 times. Finally, a text came through. What the fuck did you do? I stared at that message for a long time. I thought about responding. Thought about explaining. Thought about telling him exactly how it felt to be betrayed, lied to, and stolen from. But I didn't. Because he wanted drama now. He wanted engagement, reaction, and emotion. He wanted me to fight so he could paint me as the crazy ex-wife. Instead, I took a screenshot of his profanity-laced text and forwarded it to Patricia with a note, for the file. At 10:15, Patricia called. Meridian has the package. I just got a call from their general counsel. They've scheduled an emergency board meeting for this afternoon. That was fast. Rebecca, what Daniel did isn't just unethical. It's a liability nightmare. If the IRS decides to audit Meridian's expense accounts because of his fraud, the whole firm could be in jeopardy. They're going to throw him under the bus so fast his head will spin. By noon, my phone was on fire. Daniel had called 23 times. Thomas Carr had called 6 times. I had voicemails from Daniel's mother, his brother, even his assistant at work, all begging me to call them back. I ignored them all. At 2 p.m., I got a text from Daniel that was different from the others. No anger. No profanity. Just 3 words. Please call me. I called Patricia instead. Should I talk to him? Absolutely not. Any communication goes through attorneys now. He's in crisis mode. He wants to know what you know, what you have, what you're planning. Don't give him anything. At 4:30 p.m., I was watching the news on my laptop when I saw it. A brief headline on the Denver Business Journal website: Meridian financial partner placed on administrative leave pending internal investigation. They didn't name Daniel specifically, not yet. But they would. By Monday, this would be everywhere. I should have felt triumphant. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt nothing. Just a cold, empty space where my marriage used to be. That night, someone rang my doorbell at 9 p.m. I looked through the peephole and saw Daniel standing on my porch. He looked terrible, tie loosened, hair disheveled, eyes red like he'd been crying. I didn't open the door. Rebecca, please, he said, his voice muffled through the wood. Please just talk to me. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. I stood on the other side of the door, my hand on the knob, listening to him beg. I know I screwed up. I know I hurt you. But you don't understand what you've done. They're taking everything. My partnership, my stock options, everything I've worked for. They're talking about criminal charges. The IRS is involved. Rebecca, please, you have to stop this. We can work something out. I'll give you whatever you want. Just please stop. Whatever I want. Now he was willing to give me whatever I wanted. Rebecca, I know you're in there. Please. I'm begging you. I'll do anything. Anything at all. I waited until he stopped talking. Until the only sound was his ragged breathing through the door. Then I spoke, loud enough for him to hear me clearly. You wanted a divorce without drama, Daniel. I gave you exactly what you asked for. This isn't a drama. This is business. And in business, you taught me that the winner is whoever's willing to do what the other person isn't. You weren't willing to be honest. You weren't willing to be fair. You weren't willing to see me as anything more than an obstacle to your happiness. I paused, letting that sink in. So I did what you would have done. I found your weakness. I gathered my resources. And I struck when you thought you were safe. You wanted to treat our marriage like a corporate acquisition? Congratulations. You just got taken over. Silence. Then, so quietly I almost didn't hear it, I'm sorry. I know you are, I said. Now get off my porch before I call the police and add a restraining order to your list of problems. I heard his footsteps retreating. I heard his car start. Watched through the window as his taillights disappeared down the street. And then, finally, I cried. Not because I felt bad for him. Not because I regretted what I'd done. But because 15 years of my life were really, truly over. The weekend after I filed was the longest of my life. Not because I was having second thoughts, I wasn't. But because everything was suddenly real. The papers had been served. The board had been notified. There was no taking it back now. I'd lit the fuse, and now I just had to wait for the explosion. Saturday morning, Patricia called with an update. Meridian's board met for 4 hours yesterday afternoon. They've officially terminated Daniel's partnership and opened an internal investigation into his expense reports. They're also cooperating with the IRS, which means they're throwing him completely to the wolves to protect themselves. What does that mean for him? It means he's going to face federal tax fraud charges. The penalties for that can be severe: fines, potential jail time, definitely career destruction. No financial firm will touch him after this. He's done. I absorbed that. Jail time. I hadn't thought it would go that far. Rebecca, are you okay? Patricia's voice was gentle. I don't know, I admitted. This is bigger than I thought it would be. It's exactly as big as it needs to be. What Daniel did wasn't just wrong, it was criminal. You didn't create this situation. He did. You're just making sure he faces the consequences. I knew she was right. But knowing and feeling are different things. Monday morning, the story broke wide open. The Denver Post ran a front-page business section article, Meridian Financial Partner Fired Amid Fraud Investigation. This time they named Daniel. They detailed the allegations: misuse of corporate funds, tax fraud, violation of ethical standards. They quoted an anonymous source saying he'd been conducting an affair with a junior employee and billing it as business expenses. My phone exploded. Friends I hadn't heard from in years were texting me. Are you okay? Is this about Daniel? Do you need anything? I didn't respond to most of them. What was I supposed to say? Yes, that's my husband. Well, almost ex-husband. Yes, I'm the one who exposed him. No, I don't feel bad about it. But then I got a call from someone I didn't expect. Daniel's mother, Helen. Helen had never liked me. From the moment Daniel brought me home, she'd made it clear I wasn't good enough for her son. Not successful enough. Not from the right family. Not ambitious enough. For 15 years, she'd tolerated me the way you tolerate a stray cat your kid insists on keeping, with thin patience and constant criticism. I almost didn't answer. But curiosity got the better of me. Hello, Helen. Rebecca. Her voice was nice. I want you to know what you've done to this family. I'm listening. Daniel has been destroyed. Publicly humiliated. His career is over. His reputation is ruined. And for what? Because your feelings were hurt? Because he wanted to move on with his life. The audacity was breathtaking. Helen, your son stole over $200,000 from our marriage. He committed tax fraud. He violated his employment contract. He lied to me for years while setting up another woman in a condo on my dime. I didn't destroy him. He destroyed himself. You vindictive bitch, she hissed. You couldn't stand that he found someone better. Someone younger, prettier, more successful than you'll ever be. So you decided to ruin him. Something in me snapped. You want to talk about success, Helen? Let's talk about it. Daniel's success, the career you're so proud of, the partnership he earned, the money he made, was built on my back. I gave up my career to support him. I moved across the country. I managed his life so he could focus on work. I networked with his colleagues' wives. I hosted the dinner parties that got him promoted. Every single step of his climb, I was there, pushing him up. And when he got to the top, he kicked me off the ladder and told me I'd been living off his success. I was shaking now, but my voice was steady. So yes, Helen. I took him down. I took down the career I helped build. And I'd do it again. Because your son treated me like I was disposable. Like 15 years of my life meant nothing. And I will not be disposed of quietly. Silence on the other end of the line. Then, you'll regret this. No, I said. I really won't. I hung up. Over the next 2 weeks, the divorce proceedings became a public spectacle. Daniel's attorney, Thomas Carr, tried everything. They filed motions claiming I'd accessed his private financial records illegally. Patricia shut that down immediately. As his wife, I had every legal right to review joint financial documents. They claimed emotional distress and asked for a gag order to keep me from discussing the case publicly. The judge denied it, noting that I hadn't discussed anything publicly. The press had obtained their information through public court filings. They tried to paint me as a gold digger, a bitter ex-wife, a woman scorned seeking revenge rather than justice. But Patricia was brilliant. She presented the evidence methodically. The hidden bank accounts, the fraudulent tax deductions, the systematic transfer of marital assets, the 8 months of paying Jessica's rent. Every lie Daniel had told, documented, and time-stamped. The judge, a woman in her 60s named Barbara Hendricks, was not amused. At one particularly memorable hearing, Thomas Carr tried to argue that Daniel's affair was irrelevant to asset division. Judge Hendricks looked at him over her reading glasses. "Counselor, your client spent marital funds to support a mistress, filed false tax returns to hide those expenses, and violated his employment contract in the process. The affair itself may not be relevant, but the financial misconduct absolutely is." Motion denied. Daniel sat at his attorney's table, and I watched him shrink a little more with each ruling that went against him. He'd lost weight. He looked older, grayer, and diminished. The confident, arrogant man who'd asked me for a clean divorce was gone. In his place was someone who looked beaten. I should have felt satisfied. Instead, I just felt tired. The turning point came at a settlement conference 6 weeks after I'd filed. Judge Hendricks ordered both parties to attend a mandatory negotiation to try to resolve the case without a trial. We sat in a conference room, me and Patricia on one side, Daniel and Thomas on the other, with the judge at the head of the table. "Let me be clear," Judge Hendricks said. "I've reviewed all the evidence in this case. If we go to trial, Mr. Chen, you are going to lose. You are going to lose badly. The evidence of financial misconduct is overwhelming. The evidence of hidden assets is irrefutable. If this goes before me for a final hearing, I will award Mrs. Chen the house free and clear, the majority of your retirement accounts, a substantial portion of your remaining assets, and spousal maintenance in an amount that will ensure she maintains the lifestyle she had during the marriage." She let that sink in. "Now, you can fight this. You can rack up hundreds of thousands in legal fees, drag this out for another year, and end up with the same result. Or you can negotiate a settlement today that at least lets you keep some control over the outcome. Your choice." Thomas leaned over and whispered urgently to Daniel. Daniel's face was pale. He looked at me across the table, and for the first time since this started, I saw something other than anger in his eyes. I saw defeat. "What do you want?" he asked. His voice was hoarse. Patricia started to speak, but I held up a hand. "I want the house, with the mortgage paid in full by you. I want 60% of your retirement accounts. I want $7,000 to $5,000 from the savings accounts. I want spousal maintenance of $10,000 a month for 10 years. And I want a written apology." "An apology?" Thomas sputtered. "That's not a standard term in a divorce settlement." "It's my term," I said. I was looking at Daniel, not his lawyer. "I want you to write, in your own words, an acknowledgement of what you did. How you lied. How you stole. How you tried to screw me over. I want it on record. And I want you to sign it." Judge Hendricks raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Daniel stared at me. "Why? So you can use it against me later? So you can show it to people?" "No," I said. "Because I want you to face what you did. I want you to write it down and admit it. Not to me. To yourself." Silence filled the room. Finally, Daniel nodded. "Fine. If that's what it takes to end this." We spent the next 3 hours hammering out the details. Patricia was relentless, making sure every term was airtight, every loophole closed. By the time we finished, the settlement agreement was 22 pages long. Daniel would pay off the house mortgage, $300,000. I would receive $720,000 from his retirement accounts. I would get $7,000 to $5,000 in cash. He would pay me $10,000 a month in spousal maintenance for 10 years, $1.2 million total. And he would write and sign a letter of admission. The total, approximately $2.3 million, plus the house. When we walked out of that conference room, Patricia turned to me. You just became a millionaire. I didn't feel like a millionaire. I felt exhausted. A week later, a courier delivered a manila envelope to my door. Inside was the signed settlement agreement and a handwritten letter from Daniel. I sat on my couch, the couch I'd picked out, in the living room I'd designed, in the house that was now fully mine, and read it. Rebecca, I don't know how to start this except to say you were right about everything. I lied to you. I cheated on you. I stole from you. I tried to manipulate you into accepting a divorce settlement that would have left you with almost nothing while I walked away with everything. For 15 years, you supported me. You gave up your career, your dreams, your life to help me build mine. And when I didn't need you anymore, I tried to throw you away like you were nothing. You weren't nothing. You were everything. You were the reason I succeeded. And I was too arrogant, too selfish, too stupid to see it until it was too late. I'm not writing this because the judge made me. I'm writing it because it's true. You deserved better than me. You deserved better than what I gave you. And I'm sorry. I'm so, truly, deeply sorry. I know this doesn't fix anything. I know this doesn't change what I did. But I need you to know that I see it now. I see what I had. I see what I lost. And I will regret it for the rest of my life. Daniel. I read it 3 times. Then I folded it carefully and put it back in the envelope. It didn't make me feel better. It didn't give me closure. But it did give me something. Proof that I wasn't crazy. Proof that I hadn't imagined the unfairness, the disrespect, the betrayal. Proof that I'd been right to fight back. The final divorce decree was entered 2 months later. I stood in Judge Hendrick's courtroom as she officially dissolved my marriage to Daniel Chen. 15 years, reduced to a legal document and a signature. As I walked out of the courthouse, Patricia beside me, I felt something shift inside me. The weight I'd been carrying, the weight of anger, of betrayal, of injustice, it didn't disappear. But it lightened. I'd fought back. I'd won. And more importantly, I'd proven to myself that I wasn't the invisible, disposable woman Daniel had tried to make me. I was Rebecca Chen. And I was worth fighting for. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I stood in my kitchen, the same kitchen where this all began, and realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd thought about Daniel. The house was mine now, free and clear. The mortgage had been paid off as part of the settlement. Every room, every piece of furniture, every carefully chosen paint color belonged only to me. It didn't feel like our house anymore. It felt like my home. I've restarted my design career in earnest. With the financial security from the settlement, I didn't have to take every project that came my way. I could be selective. I could take on work I was passionate about. Within 6 months, I'd built a client list that rivaled what I'd had before I'd given it all up. I'd also started saying no. No to obligations I didn't want. No to people who took more than they gave. Not to make myself smaller to make others comfortable. It was terrifying at first. But it was also liberating. I heard through mutual friends that Daniel had taken a job at a small financial consulting firm in Colorado Springs. His salary was less than half what he'd made at Meridian. He was rebuilding his life from scratch, trying to recover from the IRS penalties and the reputational damage. Jessica had left him 3 months after the scandal broke, when it became clear he wasn't the successful partner she'd thought she was signing up for. I didn't take pleasure in his downfall. But I didn't feel sorry for him either. He'd made his choices. Now he was living with the consequences. People sometimes asked me if I regretted how hard I'd come at him. If I thought I'd gone too far. My answer was always the same. No. Daniel had wanted a clean divorce. No drama. No mess. He'd wanted to walk away from 15 years of marriage with all his assets intact, leaving me with scraps and telling himself he'd been generous. I'd simply held him to the same standards he'd held me to our entire marriage. I'd been strategic. I'd been ruthless. I'd been everything he'd been, except I'd been smarter about it. The divorce wasn't about revenge, not really. It was about justice. It was about refusing to be erased. It was about standing up and saying, my contributions mattered and my sacrifices mattered. And in the end, the judge agreed. Sometimes late at night, I thought about the woman I'd been when Daniel first asked for a divorce. The woman who'd been so shocked, so hurt, so lost. The woman who'd almost accepted his terrible settlement just to make the pain stop. I was grateful I'd found the strength to fight. Not just for the money, though the financial security was life-changing, but for myself. For the principle of it. For the message it sent to Daniel and to everyone watching. You cannot treat people as disposable and expect no consequences. I'd learned something important through this whole nightmare. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to be the victim in someone else's story. Daniel had wanted to cast me as the sad, grateful ex-wife who accepted his crumbs and quietly disappeared. Instead, I'd become the villain in his story. The woman who wouldn't go quietly, who fought back, who won. And I was okay with that. Because from where I was standing, I wasn't the villain at all. I was the woman who'd finally learned her worth. And that was worth everything I'd fought for. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever had to fight for what you deserved, or if you believe that justice sometimes requires refusing to be nice, leave a comment below. Tell me your story. I like to know. And if you want more stories about people who refuse to be pushed around, then like and subscribe to the channel. Because I'm here to remind you that you don't have to accept someone else's version of what's fair. Sometimes the cleanest break is the one where you take everything you're owed and walk away with your head held high. See you in the next one.